Today's fairy tale is a wild, fun story about self-delusion and how bad it can be when other people feed into that delusion. It's called Prince Hyacinth and the Dear Little Princess. It starts with Hyacinth's parents. So his dad is this king who wants this princess, but she's under an enchantment that makes her not want to marry anybody. Because, you have to be enchanted to want to stay single. The king is so desperate to marry her, he goes to a fairy for advice. And the fairy says, well, she's got this cat she really loves. If you step on that cat's tail, then you will be the one that she's destined to marry. I would not be impressed by someone purposely stepping on my cat's tail, but okay. The king tries to step on the cat's tail for 8 days and the cat eludes him and he can't do it. Finally, King steps on the cat's tail, but then in that moment, the cat transforms into a tall man who has been the one who enchanted the princess not to get married in the first place. And he's like, all right, you broke the enchantment by stepping on my tail, but I'll have my revenge. You shall have a son who will never be happy until he finds out that his nose is too long. And if you ever tell anyone what I just said to you, you'll vanish away instantly and no one will ever see or hear from you again. But the king thinks this threat is silly. He's like, if I have a son with a nose that long, he's gonna know, right? But he follows the instructions not to tell anyone about this, so he gets married, they have a son, name him Hyacinth, but then the king dies, and the queen doesn't know about all of this. When he's born with beautiful blue eyes and the prettiest little mouth, but the longest nose ever, the queen decides she's not gonna let him know that most people don't like that. She commands everyone in court and the kingdom to make him feel good about his nose, to tell him that that's the right kind of nose that everybody wants. He's only allowed to play with long-nosed children, and people purposely diss small noses in front of him, so he always thinks his is the best. His tutor tells him that all the great heroes of history had noses just like his. So when he turns 20, his mom decides it's time for him to marry. So she has the portraits of a bunch of princesses brought to him. And there's this one who's just called Dear Little Princess. And he instantly falls in love with her, even though she has a normal sized nose. The story, translated from the French, calls it a little saucy nose. He just thinks she's beautiful all around. And so he wants to marry her. Her father consents. And then he goes to meet her. And just as he's about to kiss her hand, that same evil enchanter who pretended to be the cat from before suddenly shows up, grabs the princess, and swoops her away. Well, the prince is like, I'm not going back home until I find and rescue this princess. He goes alone on his horse and just sadly lets his horse lead him wherever he'll go. And eventually he's hungry and he sees this house with a light, so he stops in. In it is a little old woman who, it says, seems like she's 100 years old, and she has a tiny, tiny little nose that can barely hold up her spectacles. Turns out she's a fairy, and as soon as she and the prince see each other, they both start laughing at each other's noses. He's like, oh my god, what a small nose, and she's like, oh my god, what a schnoz. And he's totally stunned that she's laughing at him or thinks anything's weird about it. She calls in her servants to feed him, but just keeps making jibes about his nose. During dinner, she's like, I can't even see what's on my plate in the shadow of your nose. And it pisses him off. He keeps thinking, my god, why won't she shut up about my nose? And when all her servants keep flattering her, he thinks, well, I'm glad I haven't been surrounded by flatterers my whole life. I'm glad I have a realistic view of myself, because she thinks she's all that just because these people flatter her. Ha ha. She keeps making comments about the nose, and finally he's like, listen, I'm just gonna leave if you say one more thing about my nose. She's like, I won't say anything more. I'll just pretend you have a normal nose. I mean, you have enough for 3 normal noses. Just can't help herself. So he leaves. And then as he travels through the world, all these people mock him and he is very confused. Eventually, that old lady decides to help him and have pity on him. She steals the princess from the evil dude, puts her in a palace of crystal, and then sets it right in our dude's path so he'll find it. Well, he does, but he can't break her out, and he's trying, and she manages to stretch her hand out to him so he can kiss it, but he can't because his nose is too long. And finally he exclaims, well, I must admit my nose is too long. And then suddenly the crystal prison disappears, the fairy shows up and delivers the moral, which is, you see how self-love keeps us from knowing our own defects of mind and body. Our reason tries in vain to show them to us. We refuse to see them till we find them in the way of our interests. Then she also magically transforms his nose to normal size. And then he marries the princess and lives happily ever after. It's an interesting story to look at because in a way the moral is good. You should be aware of your own defects. It's not good for someone to be surrounded by flatterers who make them think they're the king or queen of the world. But when the defect's just how big your nose is, then it feels like body shaming. But I guess if his defect was being an evil tyrant who had no empathy for anyone else and only cared about his own success and needs and used that to hurt people and oppress people, and if he was constantly told by his flatterers that the things he did weren't insane and horrible and wrong and bad for the country, that would be a darker story. As always, check out my book, Dust Spells, and my podcast. All of the links are in the bio.